Hello everyone and welcome to a new video about the nCine. Today I'm going to show you some of the new features and changes of the 2020-05 release. You can find the download links in the video description. Some of the headlines of this release are the JugiMap Support and the resulting enhanced sprite system, the Qt5 backend on desktop, the release of the SpookyGhost animation tool, the integration of the Nuklear GUI and the FileSystem API. JugiMap is an application for creating 2D game maps, and it offers an API for using the exported maps in game engines. Starting with this release, the nCine becomes one of the official engines supported by the API. You can see the results of this integration in the two projects linked in this slide. They are heavy scenes in terms of number of sprites and features used, and thus a very important testbed for stability and correctness. When JugiMap's author contacted me for a collaboration, I was very excited. He also presented me a list of requirements to meet the baseline of a supported engine. Some of those requirements are shown on this slide. Custom anchor points allow a sprite to be rotated around a point that is different from its center or to position it with a precise shifting amount. Non-uniform scaling refers to the possibility of scaling a sprite in two different ways along the two axes. You can, for example, make a sprite twice as wide and half as tall. Texture flipping was already supported in the engine, but it wasn't a state of the sprite that was kept track of. You could just flip a texture along one of the two axes, but later you couldn't query the engine to know if your current state was the original one or the flipped one. This has now changed, and you can just enable or disable flipping and have the expected results. Another interesting addition is the possibility to specify custom OpenGL blending factors. It is now possible to have additive, multiply, pre-multiply, alpha and more. Qt5 joins GLFW and SDL2 as a new desktop backend. This means that on PC you can create a Qt5 application, say a complex game development tool, and have the engine render inside a custom Q OpenGL widget that you can place wherever you want. Being a backend, it also means that Qt5 will be responsible for the window and OpenGL content creation and for dispatching input messages. For gamepad events, in particular, it will rely on the optional Qt gamepad library. Seeing that Qt5 supported touch events, I decided to add them on desktop platforms. I then remembered that SDL2 supported those events too, and I added them in the engine as well. As a bonus, I have added pressure and event information on both desktop and Android. Keep in mind that when you work with Qt5, the engine will still be able to render ImGUI and Nuclear, and you can mix the three interfaces if you fancy so. At the end of January, I released SpookyGhost on itch.io. SpookyGhost is a procedural animation tool for sprites. It can change a sprite property, like its position, scale, and rotation, or it can modify its shape by rendering it on a grid of vertices and deforming the grid. When you're satisfied with the results, you can export a sprite sheet or the individual frames. By being an nCine-based tool, you can expect it to be cross-platform. As a matter of fact, it currently runs on Linux, Windows, and macOS. Nuclear is an immediate mode GUI toolkit, just like Dear ImGUI. It has a slightly different scope though, as it is very skinnable. I would expect it to be better suited for a game interface. As I said previously, it will work together with Dear ImGUI and Qt5. The FileSystem API extends the realm of possibility of the engine and replaces some old and limited code that was used before. It features various path manipulation functions that should be stable and well tested. It makes it possible to traverse a directory and list its contents. This is a very useful feature that allows for the creation of a file browser, as you can find in SpookyGhost and in a new application test. You can delete, rename and copy files, and you can create, delete and rename directories. You can query a file size or access time and inspect or change its permissions. The API is consistent and works transparently on its two implementations, the Windows API implementation and the POSIX one for all other platforms. Last but not least, let's see some more fixes and features added. The debug overlay interface has gained a node inspector. With it, you will be able to show and change the properties of all nodes in the scene. You can change, for example, the string of a text node, rotate a sprite, disable the alpha blending, know how many particles are alive in a particle system, and so on. On Windows, you can choose to link the engine with the Angle rendering libraries and use OpenGL over a DirectX layer. On some older graphics cards, where the OpenGL driver is not so stable or conformant, using Angle might be the only choice to have a game or a tool working correctly. The application can now resume and suspend events and prepare itself, for example by saving some important data. One of the bugs that the JugiMap author reported to me was that sometimes sprites would flicker. I discovered that the problem was related to render command sorting, and I made it stable by adding a second sort key. Each command will have a key generated from the assigned material and a second key associated with the drawable node creation time. C-style strings can now be used as hashmap keys. Before this release, it was only possible to use string objects as keys because the key comparison code was based on pointers alone. We will now employ a special character-by-character string comparison code when dealing with character arrays. During the development of SpookyGhost, I needed to save the resulting texture frames as PNG images. I backported that code, and now the engine has a texture saver interface and PNG and WebP implementations of that interface. As you would expect by a new version of the engine, the integrated DRM GUI and Tracy have been updated to their latest versions. This is all for this video. I hope you enjoyed it. Please subscribe and let me know in the comments what you think of the 2020-05 release. Thank you for watching and see you soon.